further added that the operations of the DBN will not in any way result in the elimination of the Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, or any other existing development bank. As a wholesale bank, the DBN will lend wholesale to microfinance banks, which will on lend in medium to long-term loans to MSMEs. Micro, small and medium enterprises contribute about 48.47% to the gross domestic product's GDP of Nigeria, but have access to only about 5% of lending from deposit money banks. And again, the federal government says it is committed to providing a platform for the aspirations of next generation of women through activities that promote inclusive growth and sustainable development. Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment, Aisha Abubakar, while addressing a cross-section of development partners and other stakeholders at the official flag-off of the Women in Investment and Enterprise project in Abuja, said the project has been successfully test-run in Kaduna and has 7 states nominated for the first phase. The Women in Investment Enterprise project is focused on exposing women to market accessibility, which the minister says are key elements for ensuring sustainable and profitable MSMEs.
For us to ensure that women are able to key into the potentials that they actually have inherent within them. No matter what you give a woman, she can make something out of it. But what she needs is what we're also able to do here today, provide access to market.
Data from the federal government reveals that women entrepreneurs account for about 43% ownership of micro enterprises, but only 10% of these women have access to finance needed to successfully launch a new venture, let alone grow the existing business.
This initiative is bringing out all that it takes for our women, what they can do with their hands.
The federal government, in a conscious effort to diversify the economy, has put in place policies that are strategically geared towards creating wealth and employment through structural transformation. OPEC expects to see global oil inventories fall by the second quarter of this year in response to producers' agreement to cut output. This position was made known by OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Barkindo on Thursday while speaking to reporters on the sidelines of a conference. Barkindo said OPEC had no specific oil price objective in mind, but wanted a price that will sustain investment in the oil industry. Asked whether there was a risk that Iraq would not keep to its agreement to reduce output, Barkindo said he had met with Iraqi officials and saw no reason to doubt that Iraq would implement its cut fully. And finally, stocks tumbled on the Nigerian equities market Thursday to see the all-share index dip by 0.21% and the market capitalization close at 9.059 trillion naira. 179 million equities were traded in 2,928 deals valued at 1.493 billion naira. UBA, FBN Holdings and Access Bank led activities during the session. The advancers were topped by Livestock Feeds, UBA and CAP Hotels, while the decliners were led by Naskin, Forte Oil and Fitson Healthcare. With business news, I'm Lekating Babatunde.
All right, thank you very much, dear Leah Katung Babatunde, for the business package. Next for us now is a look at the headlines in some of the papers that we have this morning.
Ayé ìwé ìròyìn wa oní Tony Bayo Atoyebi ó jókòó báyìí.
I like that.
That is the thing we're discussing today. We're taking a look at indigenous languages, how much of it that we can actually communicate and those disappearing. Anyway, welcome to the paper review.
Good morning, Blessing. I like that. Many of our indigenous languages are dying. In fact, many of us, the elite, are most guilty of it. We don't train our children to speak our native tongue. We think it is demeaning for them to speak so. Don't you think so, Kinsley? Good morning.
All right. Bayo, we kicked off the program actually speaking our respective languages, to indicate the seriousness of the subject matter. Happily, Blessing and I haven't lost our mother tongue, and we hope that we have been able to transmit this also to our children.
I'm trying.
I have not also. Good morning, Nigeria. Incidentally,
Yes.
a person is proficient at other languages when he learns his mother tongue proficiently first?
Well, we have experts to discuss that subject matter. And then it's also said that if you learn a language before the age of 15, you can't forget that language. All right, let's take a look now at the headlines in today's newspapers, beginning, of course, with This Day newspaper. This Day newspaper is our first for us to take a look at this morning. So we'll have that uploaded on the screen for you to see, and then we'll check the headlines. Now, straight away, we say it's just above the nameplate, which says 396.5 billion naira multilateral fund for new development bank as federal government applies for CBN's license. And next to that is NNPC 6 more royalty on deep offshore and inland basins PSCs. That is, PSCs stands for production sharing contracts. That's one of the things they say in the oil and gas industry. Now, the lead story for this day has a double-decker headline. Southern Kaduna, that's the kicker. Religion will kill Nigeria if once Soyinka is Nobel laureate. And a writer says Oshibajo laments government's inability to bring bigots to justice. Now, next, also on the front page of this day newspaper, executive and legislature's disagreement over closure of Abuja airport deepens. And you have a writer there, it says Buhari submits list of ambassadors and drops Mamora. Slain soldiers in renewed Boko Haram attacks for burial today. That story can be found inside the paper. That's for this day newspaper. That's Blessing.
Okay, I'll take off with the Daily Trust. From the Daily Trust, just below the nameplate, you have Kudirat. Supreme Court reopens Al-Mustafa's case. That's story we find on page 8. No going back on closure of Abuja Airport. This has come from the minister, and that story is trending on page 13. Buhari nominates 46 non-career ambassadors. That's a story we find on page 3. But leading for the Daily Trust this morning is that story on former President Jonathan. Jonathan approved 80 billion naira special funds for Dasuki. That story starts right there, but continues on page 5. The photograph you have on the front page of the Daily Trust has that of 2006 Nigerian National Order of Merit, NMOM, awardee Professor Omawumi A. Sadiq, President Muhammadu Buhari, then the chairman of the governing board, Professor Etim Moses Essien, and also another awardee, Professor Tanuri Ojaide. That's the photograph you have there. But still trending on some of the other stories you find on page of the book print. But let me let Bayo come in at this point.
Yes. The topic of concern in the nation now is religion. Religion is supposed to be every individual's bid to do the scriptural will of his creator as a means of making heaven. However, how it is practiced in Nigeria has driven fear and sometimes loss of light in our nation. The vice president, who was also at that book launch, Professor Yomi Osinbajo, said the manipulation of religion by the elite has led to the problem we face. He says the elite use religion when it is convenient and at other times use ethnicity or some other identification. Sadly, when they have been, nobody has been prosecuted or for religious violence, but none has ever been brought to conclusion, even when they are taken to court. Why are such cases not concluded? He asked these rhetorical questions. Alluding to the president's catchphrase on corruption, Professor Wolushinka says, if we don't tame religion in this nation, religion will kill us. The Nobel laureate said, to monks, clerics, and spiritual leaders, he says, it is not sufficient to say the conduct is not permitted or those who do that are not followers of our prophet or our faith. He says, those who mouth such are partisan to the conduct that are universally condemnable. Also, Catholic Bishop of Sokoto, Bishop Hassanatu Kuka, asserted that religion has been used for manipulative tendencies by those he described as northern elites. He says, unless we define what constitutes religion, it will continue to be used as a cover to perpetuate and subjugate people, and the problem will continue to persist. The book that was launched was authored by Professor Olufemi Val. Meanwhile, all those comments were centered on the crisis in southern Kaduna. The Nigerian army is to conduct what they describe as Operation Kunama, which literally means Operation Scorpion, with a view to ending the violence in southern Kaduna. You remember that the armed forces are often having operations that relate to animals, python dance, crocodile smile. This time, they didn't tell us what the scorpion will be doing, whether it will be smiling or frowning or stinging.
It should be stinging.
But this is the outcome of the meeting they held with the commander-in-chief yesterday. General Buratai categorically explained that the operation, Kunama's second, is planned to cover southern Kaduna and will also cover parts of Plateau and Kano states.
All right, Bayo, thanks. Next paper for us to take a look at now will be the Punch newspaper. But just before we get Punch up on the screen, just to indicate that, you know, the Nigerian elite has always been a challenge, as it were, even a problem to this country. When the elite class is not using religion, it's exploiting ethnicity, you know, to further its own ends. But let's see how things go with the other papers that we have this morning. Punch newspaper. Buhari made service chiefs over Kaduna killings. That's above the nameplates. And reps accuse IG of diverting 1.8 billion armored vehicles funds. And Adeboye's decision to appoint national overseer irreversible. That's according to the RCCG. And then the lead story, of course, still deals with the exploitation of religion. If we don't tame religion, it will kill Nigeria. That's the headline is similar to what we have in this day newspaper. And then below the photograph there on the front page, you can't remove a Kweremadu. PDP dares APC senators. That story is inside page 12. And APC quizzes Kwankwaso over Northwest crisis. And Nigeria may lose $550 million Abacha loot to the U.S. That's attributed to Professor Ishe Sage. Again, details of the story can be found inside.
The Blueprint has the leading headline, Kudirat's murder, first trouble for Al-Mustafa with the riders. Supreme Court okays appeal after 42 months acquittal. That story continues on page 6. But you have, moving further down, below the photograph, you have the Buhari bows to governor, drops ambassadorial nominees. But this is different headline from the way the Daily Trust captured his own, which saying something about Buhari nominating 46 non-career ambassadors. But the Blueprint says Buhari bows to governor, drops ambassadorial nominees. Boko Haram not defeated until Chibok girls rescued. This is coming from the presidency. You find a story on page 7. Abuja Airport's runway repairs to gulp 5.8 billion naira. You find that on page 7 as well. Okay, before you come in, Kingsley, let's see what other stories. Offer asylum to Jame. Reps urge Buhari. Saudi okays Nigeria third world best in Hajj management. That's a story you find on page 6.
Let me just take a couple of headlines from the Authority newspaper. We still have a story on the front page of the Authority. That's the second list story below the photograph on the front page there. It says federal government to fix Enugu and Port Harcourt airports. That's also on the front page. And then above the nameplate of the Authority newspaper, you have 3 other headlines. 2 of them already read by Blessing from the other papers. Kudirat Abiola's murder. Supreme Court okays retrial of Al-Mustafa. That's on page 4. And Rivers PDP alleges witch hunt as police arrest 21 INEC officers. That's on page 4 also. And on page 2 is a story on the U.S. being unwilling to return $550 million Abacha loot. That's according to the Presidential Committee.
Yes, that story about the money allegedly looted by the former elite head of state was alluded to by the chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption. It was a joint press conference with the special advisor on diaspora, and they asserted that a court in the United States had actually forfeited the sum of $505.5 million in 2004. And if initiatives are not carried on seriously, we may lose this sum. So the committee at the press conference urged the Nigerians in diaspora to join in the advocacy to renew recovery of such stolen assets. Professor Ise Sage specifically asserted that this is our stolen patrimony, and he listed some of them, 505.5 million and another 404 million. There's also what he described as the estate of the late Alemesi, which is worth 15 million. Related to that is also the story of the Borno that you read. Malala, you recall Malala was a victim of the Taliban terrorism in India. She visited Nigeria and had made an appeal. And to that, the appeal in which he wrote a letter to President Muhammadu Buhari, President clarified that the asymmetrical war with Boko Haram has not ended with the dispersal of the insurgents. He said that until Chibok girls and others abducted are rescued, the war cannot be said to be over. But quickly, a baby factory has also been uncovered in Borno State. 2 people have been arrested and 3 others because 2 babies were sold each at 100,000 each. Also, what they describe as illegal motor parks have been closed in Maiduguri. It is said that it is the venue which insurgents bought vehicles to transport themselves to other parts of the country.
All right, Baya Toyobi, well, that's the much that we can take for the initial part review segment today. We'd like to thank you for being with us today on Indeed Odds for the week. We wish you a lovely weekend and see you again on Monday.
I hope you enjoy discussing Nigerian languages.
Oh, of course, we'll enjoy that, taking on our guests. We're also discussing, of course, the Cup of Nations 2017. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll take our 2 principal items for discussion this morning.
The attention of the management of the NTA Television College, Jos, has been drawn to some illegal websites currently operated in the name of the college by some unscrupulous individuals to defraud applicants. In view of this, the college authority wishes to inform the public that any person or group asking applicants to make financial transactions should be considered as online scammers and fraudsters. All admission forms can only be purchased at the college or any NTA station across the nation. Also, members of the public are to kindly contact the college before making any payments on 0803 721 6725 or 0803 314 6151. NTA Television College Jos does not operate any online or individual accounts. Be warned that the college will not be held accountable for any online payments. Announcer, Management.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Do you speak your mother tongue? To prepare the discussion for this morning, our correspondent Ahmad Ambali was on the streets of Abuja to sample the views of the public on this issue.
My name is Richard Ojekwa.
From the southeastern state, I'm from Onitsha specifically. My children, all of them speak my native dialect. They speak pure Onitsha dialect of Igbo.
Daddy Daro. Daddy, thank you. Daro for including my driver language, my tribal language.
You are mixing it with English again.
Lano, I know Wednesday, I call basic science, mathematics, and subjects English, then computer, then social study, then Nasarai, then. So after class, in the breaking. So after break, to closing period.
Why do you still have to put after, break, closing? Can't you say it?
Because I can't say it all in my language.
What's come in Igede?
Kewe.
Kewe. Okay, so if you want to say it in Igede that I'm going home, how do you say that?
I'm not sure of how to say it.
English is not our language. If you want to use a secret word now, you have to use your language to tell your son or your daughter.
We have become mechanical. We are not real. We're very artificial people. People mimicking, just like parroting.
My advice for them is that let them go and meet their mom and dad to teach them their local language. Some people can interview you as they are interviewing you today. It will be a shame for them if they cannot speak their language.
How do I say thank you in Igbo language?
Dalu.
Dalu, sir.
Dalu, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
sir. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right, our correspondent there, Ahmad Ambale Oweseo, that means thank you in Edo language for that background report. We're being joined now by a number of guests. First with us here in the studio is the former director at the Federal Ministry of Education. He's Mr. Kalu Mike Afo. Mr. Afo, it's our pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much, Presenter.
All right, and then also joining us from our Just Studios, we have a former president of the Linguistic Society of Nigeria, Professor Ahmed Amfani. Professor Amfani joining us from Just Network Center. A pleasure to have you today on the program.
Thank you.
All right, I'm from Ibadan studio. We're being joined by the Executive Director, African Languages Technology Initiative, Dr. Tunde Adegbola. Dr. Adegbola, thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. And lastly, about setting out the list from our Makudi studio, we are being joined by Nigeria's cultural and okay, when Makudi is not up yet, so we'll get to join our guest there in a short while. Okay,
all right. Well, gentlemen, to set the tone for our conversation, in addition to the background report that we got just now from the Vox Pop by our correspondent Ahmad Ambale, let's begin from our Just Network studios to get a proper understanding. What is the place of language in cultural transmission? And how, therefore, is it important for you to speak your mother tongue? Professor Amfani.
Yes, the issue of language is really very, very important. You see, culture is expressed via language. And your language is your identity. If you don't have a language, it means you don't have an identity. And ever since, we've been telling Nigerians that their identity lies in the languages they speak. And therefore, every Nigerian must try to understand his own language, to speak his language, to use it. And we've been telling people that it is not just a question of having town halls and what have you, but rather people should organize in such a way that their languages are actually being put into use. You use them in churches, in mosques, that is religious activities, in political activities, in education, everywhere. Because without the language, there will be no people. It is your identity. And if you don't have that language, it means you don't have an identity. Sometimes we tell people that if you take, for example, the former president of America, that is Obama, as a black man, if he comes to Nigeria, you dress him in the Igbo dress. The Igbos will assume that he is an Igbo man. But when they speak Igbo to him and he could not answer, then it becomes something else. They realize he's not Igbo, you see. And he can dress also in the Hausa dress or in Yoruba dress. But he has no identity as far as these languages are concerned, unless if he can speak the language. And that will give him the required identity for him to be either Igbo, Yoruba, or Hausa, or any other person for that matter.
Professor Amfani, thank you very much. We'll go to Ibadan, where we earlier introduced Dr. Tunde Adigbola. Of course, you've listened to Professor Amfani. It raised the issue about losing an identity. Is this gradual erosion of our mother tongue a loss to us as a people?
Oh, of course, yes. Beyond identity, it is also a question of livelihoods, because you make your livelihood negotiating in your language. And if you do not have that language, then you don't have the basis for negotiating livelihoods. All the things you know, all the knowledge you have can only be communicated within some language or the other. But when you use a foreign language, the first disadvantage that you suffer is that because this foreign language did not develop within your environment, it cannot express your environment efficiently. So you have difficulties communicating. And a lot of our people who have resorted to the use of English, for example, they may think they are escaping from the problem of not having adequate English for school. But then you find that what you are developing are just people who don't even have any capacity for thinking, because you are not able to relate with your environment, which your language developed to be able to express. A foreign language cannot express your environment efficiently.
Well, Dr. Adigbola, thank you very much. We'll come back to both your good self and Prof subsequently for us to, again, explore the preliminary aspect of how languages grow, how languages develop, grow, and ultimately get to die. But let's get a view of Mr. Kalu-Ofo on this. Mr. Kalu-Ofo, again, language as a potent vehicle for the transmission of cultural values. What's your take on this?
Thank you very much, presenter. I think before we get the general overview of language, let's try to define language. We have indigenous language, which we refer to as native or ancestral languages of a people. Then we have the mother tongue, which is the very first language a person learns in life, which normally comes from his parents, the community. Now, having put this to in perspective, Nigeria has an estimated 400 indigenous languages in this country. And we have, out of this, we have 24 of them, about 18 to 24 million speak Hausa, Igbo, or Yoruba. If we get all this, we find that there is need for us to have one indigenous Nigerian language, which everybody will speak. That is why the national policy on education says that every
All right, Mr. Ofo, we'll give you some time to sort out your papers, but just before we come back to you, again, back to Professor Ahmad Amfani at our Jos Network Studios. Prof, we understand that we've just lost the transmission, lost the signals to Jos. But to return to Ibadan, Dr. Tunde Adigbola, I would like you, again, for the benefit of our viewers, to further explore the evolution of language as part of a lived experience, as part of response and outgrowth from your environment. But that does not suggest that languages do not borrow words or ideas from one another to become a whole, as it were. So how do languages develop, how do they grow, and how do they get asphyxiated?
Well, basically, language is a system that describes the reality that you find in a given culture. The given culture there is very, very important. The objective of language is to describe the realities in a particular environment. Now, if a particular reality does not exist in an environment, there will not be a language for it. And so, the fact that a language does not have certain words does not mean that the language is deficient. The issue is that the people who speak that language have not found a need to either label that concept or describe the concept. And you talked about borrowing. Yes, I mean, every language borrows. A language is basically like a living organism. And any living organism that does not grow dies. So in the same way, a language is bound to take from other languages and also give to other languages, because language is a means of interaction. And when you interact with other people, you take some from them, you give some to them. And this is the situation with language. The problem we have in our situation is that for some reason or the other, we believe that our languages are not important. We believe that our languages are not adequate. We believe that our languages cannot be used to operate modern life. All these are fallacies. A language grows within environments. Like we say about human beings, we say you are what you eat. A language is what it is fed with. If you starve a language of a technology culture, then the language will not have words that can express technology. If you starve a language of a scientific culture, then the language will not have words to express scientific facts. The issue here is that of human agency. With the appropriate policy in Nigeria, all our languages have all the capacities to develop into whatever we want them to be, and to be able, and we'll be able to use them in every aspect of our life. And needless to say, that as long as we continue to use foreign languages, we are going to suffer certain inherent deficiency. There is no record of a people in history that became great after having adopted other people's languages. So if we are going to be great having adopted a different language, we probably are going to be the first, but we are not behaving like people who are going to achieve a first.
All right.
Well, that's a debatable point. Debatable point. I mean, the United States of America can probably brag as the wealthiest and perhaps the most powerful militarily, in the history of the world. And English language wasn't its original language.
You're correct, Kingsley. Of course, there's an amalgam of so many cultures. Okay, earlier we tried to introduce our guest in Makurdi. Now we're set to do that. Joined from the Makurdi studio by Nigeria's cultural ambassador and international artist Ta Oko. Good morning to see you and Happy New Year. So I think I can pick at least the team there.
I think Ta Oko, it's important for you to also translate, because as you know, growing up, some persons will say that if you wanted to say something that is a bit unpleasant, then you reduce it to your mother tongue. So what did you just say when we welcomed you to the program this morning?
I said to my sister, good morning. And then to Nigerians or anyone watching me, good morning, in Tiv language.
That's very interesting, Chaoko. Now, let's, having the pleasure of listening to the other guests that have spoken, the particular area I want to draw about this morning is what Dr. Adegbola just made mention. The language is a living organism. And if you don't want to stifle any living organism, you definitely have to make it grow. How much of life have we given to our indigenous languages and our mother tongue especially to keep it alive?
Well, the summation from most of your speakers that I've had so far is that first language is identity. Seeing me in my cultural dress, the first thing is to assume that, oh, this must be a Tiv person. And even if I was not Tiv, the fact that I can be identified with a color, with a dress code, simply means that I'm communicating a message. So language is first the appearance of what you see, either in symbolic reference, either in spoken form, or the written form. That's the autograph. Now, all cultures have their languages. How they develop also is a mediation of both economic growth, political and social and cultural interaction. Also, religious and other factors that impact on how human beings describe phenomena in their environment. If you live among the Eskimos, the Inuit, in the North Pole, you are not likely to know what sand is because you won't find sand, but you have so many names for snow. If you were a Bedouin or a Tuareg in the Sahara Desert, you are not likely to know what snow is all about, but you know about sand. So all cultures in themselves are indigenous. How people develop, therefore, is the political interference and economic management of resources to develop the vocabulary to express their existential identity, their pride, their honor, and their customs, either in marriage, in other ceremonies, and this is what you call language. So language first must communicate. If I'm speaking in German to you and you don't speak German, whatever I say to you is of no importance. However, it is important too that languages have what you call a transmission, a period of transition, where generations pass, the elders pass on this language to younger ones coming behind. So you have the sufferance of language legitimization when other dominant economies and political systems oppress others, either through colonialism, slavery, neocolonialism, or imperialism, what you call cultural domination, and impose their own language as the correct system of expressing yourself or oneself. So in that sense, language is dynamic, but language must be such that it is taught not just to existing generations, but we transmit knowledge of, say, pharmacology, plants, root crops, the things we do to survive on a daily basis, into scientific terms that can be kept. You have hieroglyphics, you have cuneiform. All these were extinct forms of human communication in symbols. Today you have liturgical language. You have Latin that has been transposed into legal jargon today, I would say, in courts. So you have prima facie, nemo quod dat habet, and so many things in Latin that today are used by the English. The Arabic influenced also cultures of other people. Hausa, Yoruba, Tiv, all these also mediate and help each other express how they interrelate with other communities. In my language, Tiv, for instance, we don't have a word for market. So we use the Hausa word kaswa. But the Tiv will say, Mza shin tembe, I will go to the open field. Because the open field is a place where you interact with people, not necessarily for commercial life. So if I told you, Nguzan shin tembe, I'm going to the field. If you don't know what I'm going to do there, you don't assume that I'm going to engage in commercial exchange. It may just be to meet a friend, to drink the local brukutu, the brew that has been declared for that day. So I think these areas of language is what societies must represent and express as individual groups. We must help each other preserve and promote our languages. No language is superior to the other. If I have my own level of technology, for instance, the Chinese use chopsticks to eat. Is that inferior to a spoon, knife, and fork? But so they have words for the chopstick. The important thing is that the noodles goes into their mouths. I use my bare hands to eat amala, or luam naha, that's amala, or pounded yam, inyang in Yoruba, or obeila, or bono soup. So does that mean I'm primitive? No. So I'm responding to my own requirements for my survival. So cultural tolerance. The problem why languages are disappearing is because super languages come with so-called pretenses of civilization and impose their narrow cultural values on the others. I'll give you one short example. When I was with television, you are my lovely people, I used to be a newscaster. My first appearance on television was the way I'm appearing today. And I was told, you are not properly dressed. What of your national dress? I said, national dress? I'm a shagbao. I'm a thief gentleman. This is how big people in my place dress. So it took some time for certain values to understand that there are also different values. So in essence, tradition, maintenance of culture, transmission of knowledge, legacies, heritage, this is what you call knowledge, and it's expressed through language, either in the symbolic sense and in the oral sense and written sense.
All right, okay, Kingsley.
All right, Tauko, thank you very much there for your perspective. We'll get back to you in the course of the conversation. To return to our Abuja studios, Mr. Kalu Ofor. Mr. Kalu Ofor, again, you've listened to the other guests. Moving away from the definitional issues that you had kicked off with, let's now bring it down to what's happening to us in Nigeria, which, of course, is the motivation for taking up the subject matter this morning. Namely, there is concern that other than perhaps the three major languages that we have in the country, a number of other languages in the country, mother tongue so-called, are virtually disappearing. Why is this phenomenon so? Perhaps I can, instigate you by indicating that again, there's an elite problem. The Nigerian elite class believes that, look, it is not hip for you to be speaking your indigenous language, for you to also pass this on to your children, so they must speak only English for them to function in the international environment. Is this the case?
You're absolutely right. It is the case because, one, government has made a little effort to make sure that indigenous languages do not go extinct. Sadly, it is going, because there is a general balance that a language that is not spoken is dead. When you don't feed, it's like somebody who said here, you are what you eat. So if you feed a child every day with the mother tongue, that child will grow and will never forget it. Somebody has mentioned here that what you learn before 15 years, you can never forget. Basically, that is true. Having said that, you have also mentioned that the elite is the problem. When our people went abroad to go and study, they imbibed the culture over there. They conquered them both culturally, linguistically, and otherwise, all in the name of civilization, like the person from Makodi just said. And when they came back, in our rural setting, we eat together communally on the ground, on the floor, everybody using your fingers. But when our elites came back, they started building dining table and started creating plates for every member of the family. And that bred selfishness even in the children, lost our communal life where we see ourselves. And it is the totality of these things that made government in the National Policy on Education, 2014 edition. It says every child shall be taught in the mother tongue or language of the immediate community for the first 4 years of basic education. In addition, it is expected that every child shall learn one Nigerian language. Now, is this being applied? No. Government haven't got the appropriate monitoring mechanism for enforcement of this thing. Because the federal unity colleges, for example, can be doing that. But most private schools, which are much more after money, they want to teach parents, especially the elite parents, who can afford to pay their fees, that their child can speak English, even from creche, can start speaking English, which shouldn't be so. And when this child leaves that creche, comes home, your mother, who is supposed to talk to you in your mother language, is also busy. She's a civil servant, comes home tired, leaves you to the house helps. These are the things, these are the disconnects that we have in the system. So,
we are still in the line of explanation.
Yes.
I'm glad from the Federal Ministry of Education you're talking about what other policies have been put in place. But then, back in those years, you remember or you recall incidents of where even for you from primary school to secondary school, there is that child that don't speak vernacular. I'm sure perhaps you got into that, because I remember getting into that. If you get to speak any other thing other than the English language, you are even fined or given some kind of punitive measures to actually address that. Yes. In fact, people actually stop talking in class just to aid there, yes, especially for those who cannot even communicate effectively. Yes. Now, is there a problem between the home Because even the home these days, either you find a parent saying, I want my child to learn the English language first. It gives you some kind of superpower presence. So between the home, the school, where do we find this great problem?
Between the home and the school, the problem is with the parents. You've said here that parents find it difficult they want their children to speak English. Because the society we have, you have a law that says you must make English in your school SAT. If the law that made English compulsory could make Igbo language, Hausa, Yoruba, Fufude, Ifulan, Edo compulsory, you find that all our children and their parents will key into making those children learn those mother tongue languages. But because you have isolated and made English, and like he has rightly said, science, mathematics, every subject you think about is better understood or comprehended through mother tongue, if it is allowed to grow, to metamorphose, to become what it's supposed to be. But because we truncate it with the foreign culture, English language, that is why the children are even confused. If you find at homes, if you are raising a little child, the moment the child starts muttering certain words, the child gets confused because the mother may speak English, the house help who is helping you take care of her will be speaking your native language, and the siblings, if it is a place where there are other children, when they come back from school, all of them are rattling English language. They don't speak the mother tongue.
All right. So far, thank you very much. We just saw Ms. Dr. Tunde Adebola on the screen again from our Ibadan Network Center. Dr. Adebola, I would like you to speak to this, the mechanism of learning, retaining, and then utilizing a language. Against the background of what my colleague Blessing indicated, when we were in elementary school, it was also the case that, yes, even though we were taught a dual language on the one hand, but it was said that you couldn't speak vernacular at certain times because it was assumed that there might be the so-called linguistic interference in your seeking to learn the English language. So from your perspective, from your scholarly perspective, what is the mechanism of learning a language? What is the best time or the best age to teach your mother tongue, get into a second language and perhaps a third language?
A mother tongue is not a language to be taught. A mother tongue is a language you are supposed to absorb by just being a member of the speaking community. It is a second language that you might have to be taught if you are acquiring that second language in an academic environment. What we need to know here is that as human beings, when we are children, we have the capacity to take in many languages. Sometimes when you expose a child to more than one language, you may feel that the child is being retarded. It is because the child is taking time to process what the child is getting from the environment. But after some time, you see this child blossom. What we have today in Nigeria is people speaking English to children who do not have any, what I would call handlers, who do not have what it takes to connect what they are hearing to what these concepts are describing. And you will discover that the more we are speaking English to our children, the worse the general English in society is. Just go to a university class today and listen to the kind of English you hear from the lecturers or the English that you hear the students speak back, or go and read master's or PhD thesis and see the kind of English that you find there. And this is all as a result of pushing people from a very, very tender age to speak a language that does not efficiently explain their environment. Let me lay this down, that we will never have enough competent English teachers to teach enough people English to have a critical mass of development agents in this country. Because it's just not possible, 180 million people. But on the alternative, go to countries that take their languages very seriously. Go to the Inari, for example, in Europe. Only 150,000 people, they study up to university in their mother tongues. And I said earlier on that language has a very, very strong correlation with development. If we have undertaken studies that show that all the nations in the world that teach their children in foreign languages, none of them has achieved an industrial breakthrough except probably Singapore. Whereas all the nations of the world that teach their children in their mother tongue have all achieved industrial breakthrough. Now we are now going from an industrial age into an information age. The information age, an age in which language, which is the substrate, the fundamental, the foundation of information, no language, no information. We're going into an age in which language, which is the substrate of information, is going to become much more important. So if in the industrial age, people who are using foreign languages didn't make industrial breakthrough, how then do you expect people to make a breakthrough in the information age if they are deprived of their capacity to communicate naturally? Remember that the main distinguishing factor between human beings and lower animals is their capacity to discuss in a complex language, to be able to express complex thoughts. And if we deny our children this capacity, particularly that brand of that capacity endowed to us by our environment, then we are undoing them. Go and listen to all the music you hear these days from popular Nigerian artists. Tell me which one of them has more than 3 or 4 sentences. They don't have the language.
Well, thank you very much. We know a number of those artists, and I'm sure Blessing is very fond of a good number of them get mixed up here and there. But just to indicate that we have reactions coming in from our viewers already, and these are by way of tweets. Festus Akimboyewa has this tweet. It says, transactions in most of our local markets are in indigenous languages. This must be encouraged to preserve our mother tongue.
And from Comrade Tomori, here's to you. I'll start off the last one. Said, do you speak your mother tongue? Yes, I speak it. When I dream, it is in Yoruba. When thinking, it's in Yoruba. And he furthers with this other tweet. I like this topic. Up you at NTA GMN. Translation in Yoruba goes thus. Mo nífẹ̀ẹ́ sí àkórí ọ̀rọ̀ tòní. NTA GMN mo gbà fún yín.
All right. Now, Fidel Undubueze says, in a multi-ethnic nation like Nigeria, adoption of one local language, that's Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, will be difficult. Pidgin English is okay.
And from Fidel Undubueze, in a multi-ethnic nation like Nigeria, adoption of one local language, Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, will be difficult. Pidgin English is okay.
All right, now to return to our Makurdi Network Center, well, we understand, we just dropped the Makurdi Network Center in the meantime. We're going back now to Jos. Professor Ahmad Amfani, we're sure that you'll be monitoring from our Jos Network Center the comments by the other guests with respect to the various perspectives that they have brought to this conversation. Now, the point made by Dr. Adebola a moment ago that, look, we are in the information age, and language is a bedrock of information. How can you compete in the information age if your own indigenous language is deficient? But how does that square with the fact that at some point worldwide, in the history of humankind, there have been always dominant languages, the imperialist tendencies to impose one language or the other. But what is the critical advantage, in addition to your own identity, in retaining your mother tongue and transmitting this to future generations?
I think, first of all, we have to actually go back to the history of Nigeria. You see, Nigeria is a multilingual society. We have different ethnic groups, ethnic communities, and what have you. So when the Europeans came, we had the British colonial administration. And the British colonial administration insisted that English must be used as an official language for Nigeria. All other languages were relegated to the background. As time went on, something happened. When we had our independence, it became necessary that we should have, an official language or languages for Nigeria. But already the seed of discord has already been, sown. So Nigerians could not allow any of the languages to become an official language. So we tried as much as possible to see whether we can get a national policy that will take care of Nigerian languages. Right now, we don't have any. The national education policy we have only stated that in teaching at the junior primary school, a language of wider environment should be used. In the 1999 Constitution, there was also this issue of using a language of wider environment in the state assemblies. These are the only two things that were done for Nigerian languages. We have an institute at Aba, Nilla, National Institute for Nigerian Languages. And the aim was to see that Nigerian languages are promoted. But right now, we don't have an enabling policy for Nigerian languages. As long as that policy is not there, there's no way we can develop indigenous Nigerian languages. Because if you meet any governor now, he will tell you that he gets subvention from Abuja to do things in respect of health, education, road maintenance, and what have you. But there is not a single kobo as subvention in order to take care of Nigerian languages. So if you are in good time, with the governor, perhaps he can give you something from his security vote to do something about Nigerian languages. So we have quite a number of Nigerian languages, and there's no way these languages can be developed or anything can be done about them without an enabling policy. So right now, we have to understand that languages, especially indigenous languages, are not taught, but rather they are acquired. And parents are supposed to ensure that these languages are acquired at home, not in school. Because at the age of 12 or thereabout, a child must have already finished learning everything about the grammar of his own mother tongue. So when he goes to school, he is to start learning things about English. All subjects in school, especially secondary school, are taught in English. So before he could hear a single word from his mother tongue, he receives over 100 foreign words in English every day in different subjects, in geography, in biology, in physics, in mathematics. Everything is in English and a foreign language for that matter. So this issue of English being the only official language in this country is really bringing things down. Something has to be done at the National Assembly. Something to be done about the teaching of Nigerian languages. We've made quite a number of submissions from the Linguistic Association of Nigeria. We've been trying all over the years that something has to be done, something concrete about Nigerian languages. But it appears as if Nigerians themselves are not ready for business as far as their languages are concerned. And coupled with globalization, which is taking over, because if you look at the internet, it's the vehicle of globalization. And that internet has a language, and the language now is English. It appears as if English is killing almost all languages, and the world is moving towards a single language policy, where you will have only language, and that is English language. So English is actually a threat, to most languages, especially in Nigeria. And the government is not doing anything. During the time of Abuja, French was introduced as the second official language in this country. Yoruba, Hausa, or Igbo, or any other Nigerian language for that matter, was not considered as an official language. So right now, if you look at the so-called major languages, they are only major in terms of numerical strength, that they have millions of speakers. And if you look at them all, you discover that none of them was given that status of being an official language, either at regional level or even at state level. Not to talk of, being an official language in Nigeria. When a language becomes official, then the government will have to do everything possible to make sure that that language is promoted all over. And today, only English and French are being considered in that regard, and they are promoted and protected by the government. So you have to go to school, you have to learn English, you have to do everything in English. So this is a fundamental question that Nigerians will have to address in respect of their indigenous languages. We have quite a number of them, and certainly not every Nigerian language, will see the light at the end of the tunnel, you see. So it has to be the case that those languages that are ready for business, that are fully codified in the sense that they have something like writing system and orthography, they have primers, and they can be taught in schools, then such languages can be encouraged. But there has to be a real policy. And the National Assembly now will have to actually do something about that policy for Nigerian languages. As long as we don't have that policy, nothing can be done to promote indigenous Nigerian languages.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Amfani from our Jos studio. You raised some other critical points that we must take a look at. Okay, we'll go over to Makodi to pose this other question. Professor Amfani talked about the need for legislation in terms of policy and all of this. But then he also raised a point earlier saying the communication, the language, the means of communication which is supposed to have been done even in the indigenous languages for the National Assembly or the State Assembly was also discarded. So if we have a National Assembly or State Assemblies that would not even communicate in their own indigenous languages from their different constituency, how do we see the complex situation in our hands before we have that of legislation, both on policy as well as schools and all of that?
Listen, comrade, I'll be very practical in my explanations. When politicians go around Nigeria canvassing for votes and asking people to vote them into office, in whatever portfolio they want to assume from political parties, they speak in the local lingo of the people. And 99% of such interaction is in local languages. So our languages are not dying. The only problem is that they are not promoted in terms of the elite administrative systems in policy formulation, in training teachers to teach TIV language in an administrative policy sense in a school, in a formal education process. You must have teachers who have gone through the rudiments of training to be teachers in that language. It goes for all languages. Now, languages can disappear, and they do disappear. Just like in the natural sciences, I like to link up phenomenon and look at the dialectical relationship of human societies and also their environment and phenomenon. Flood can wipe out a whole people and their language. Earthquakes can wipe out a whole people and their language. Wars can migrate people from indigenous settlements to other settlements where transmission of cultural information is lost. Therefore, just as species in the forest die, the same way the stronger ones survive is the same way in social re-engineering of society and how things are organized. And it is the ruling class that must make that effort to promote actively the use of local languages. The National Assembly, the State Assembly, nothing wrong with National Assembly senators, whatever, speaking in their languages and having interpretations done. Because when I hear even professors speak English, it's horrendous sometimes. They say, I hasn't. I don't care how they speak grammar. The important thing is that he's a professor of mathematics. Why do I care if he says I haven't or I hasn't? The Japanese, the Chinese who speak English with their native accents, do they care? What is important to them is how to harness their environment to develop scientific paradigms and issues that relate to survival and the growth of their societies. Therefore, my submission to our language specialists, our government people, is to look at holistically the way of developing formal education. And informally, we have to do traditional rulers, a cultural artist. I want to be able to sing in TIV language and people to understand me. They don't have to understand TIV to enjoy rhythm of swange or understand Idoma to enjoy or mabe dance or a masquerade outing. So what is important is that language communicates. And if language communicates, then we must also allow other superior existential things in culture. I don't say in value. That you have aeroplane means it's a superior mode of transportation, but it does not belong to white people or black people. Civilization is a holistic approach of man, holding it as humanity. How we share this is important. Tolerance, because if you start to impose, I hear people say, oh, Nigeria should have one common language. How can you have a common language? What if I'm Tiv and I don't want to speak Yoruba? Why would you force me to speak Yoruba? Because my own experience as a Tiv person is to instruct my children and my environment to change and develop in that language. Therefore, we must acculturize, we must borrow, we must syncretize other people's experiences. This way we can put together and say we have a national flora, a plethora of languages that can develop us as a people. I think tolerance in developing scientific thinking is important, not chauvinism, because we must be very cautious about imposition of certain cultural values on others in the name of science.
Ta Oko, thank you very much there again for your perspective, but to the extent that we have hundreds of languages and dialects and sub-dialects, the critical point some observers will say is, all right, at the micro level, what should be the family and community responsibility in ensuring the growth and development of the mother tongue without the as has been indicated by the other guests?
In a domestic sense, there are various variables. One, if I'm married to an Igbo lady, for instance, and I'm Tiv, except our children grow in an environment where most people speak Tiv or most people speak Igbo, they are likely to take to the language of a school. That's English. And perhaps if they live in an Hausa environment, they'll speak Hausa because it's the communication language. Therefore, like I said, the contradictions of social existence, languages will disappear. Why would languages disappear? When the people who speak those languages no longer exist, the languages will disappear. That's why I'm saying I'm linking up the dialectics of human species as well as that of environmental sciences, natural phenomenon. A flood, for instance, can wipe out a community. The same way when you are teaching language, there are the cultural forms, our festivals. And part of it is borrowed religions that come with values. In my history as a Tiv person, remember that we are not Tiv. There's this misconception in Nigeria that we are Tiv people. Our language is Uzulu. We speak Zulu. But the variant in Nigeria is called Tiv as a name to describe our progenitor. So Yoruba do not speak Odudua. Odudua is just the progenitor of the Yoruba people. So I am saying, in terms of development of language, if we understand our history also, it helps to promote those things that are relevant to our existence and what we can allow other societies to impact on us positively.
Okay, Ta Uko. So we appreciate your company on the program this morning. We thank you so much, cultural ambassador as well as international artist of Rapid. Thank you very much.
Udok was a beautiful woman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have some tweets.
That's right. We have a number of tweets already, in addition to the ones that we read earlier. Olayemi Ibidu. So this topic is just on point. On my WhatsApp group, today is no English day. All posts are in our local dialect. Okun. Okun. Okay, that's the inflection. Okun. That should be in Kogi, I believe. Kogi and Kwara.
Exactly.
Yes, straddles Kogi and Kwara. Yes.
Well, from Samson Shiru, this problem goes down to the family. My mom taught me how to read Nupe at the age of 7, and at the age of 12, I could write Nupe fluently.
And
Beautiful.
J-Man has this tweet. There's a problem here, and that's to say in Nigeria, we are multilingual. The only uniting language is English. It will be too late to change that.
And from UICSDF, he said, how many people speak local language to their children at home, and how many elites attend functions where local language is spoken?
And this is from Alexin Solution Limited. The name of the individual from that company is not indicated, but from Alexin Solution. If you speak your local language in school, that's you may be punished. Even at the police station, they will lock you up. That's his claim.
And from Maman Sani, anyone who does not understand his mother tongue is like a river without a source.
And Dele Jackson Solomon, be that as it may, English language is our lingua franca, but Nigerians must not relegate their indigenous languages to the background.
From UICSC DV2 again says, what language is mother tongue for a young mother who doesn't speak any other language except English language?
Chijoke Ibem says government should make it compulsory for Nigerian history and languages to be taught in schools. It will help preserve our culture. Now, well, those are some of the tweets that we are taking in this second round of reactions from our viewers. Just to return to our Ibadan Network Center, Dr. Adebola, the same question I posed to Ta Uko before we sign him off, I would like you to respond to this. How do we encourage families, individuals, relatives, the community, as well as traditional institutions to help encourage the growth and survival of our indigenous languages? And also, in particular, taking care of the elite snobbery of saying, listen, I speak only the English language to my kids.
So the first thing is for the elite to get out of their ignorance and understand that the fact that you don't speak English to your children at home does not make them inferior in school. I mean, we went through school. My parents spoke the Yoruba language to me all my life, and I, despite that, managed to speak good English. The point I made earlier on is that we have noticed that the more people are speaking English to their children at home, the worse the English we are finding in school. So we need to understand that speaking English to children at home does not necessarily make them brilliant. There was this experiment in Ife where children were taught in two arms of classes. One arm of the classes was they were all taught in Yoruba, every subject except the English language as a second language, and the other everything was taught in English, and Yoruba was taught as a language. And the results show that those in the class in which Yoruba was spoken, they all did better than the ones in the English class. In fact, today there is a professor in one of our universities that was one of the people in that Yoruba class. So that is evidence. Until Nigerians get convinced that speaking this demotic English to your children at home worsens their situation, people will continue to speak English to their children because they believe it is a language of opportunity, they believe it is the language of education, it is the language of officialdom, it is the language of administration, and they believe that anybody who wants to get economic advantage will need to speak English to their children, but it does not really work. You have spoken English to your children all this while, they've gone through university education, they are now out, they are jobless, and they are speaking really, really less than human, they are communicating at less than human levels, because notice, it is very difficult for a young person in Nigeria today to speak without saying, I hope you are understanding me. I hope you are following me. He has not even said anything yet. The point is that there's a lot in that person's mind. And the person does not have the language to express it. And that's why he keeps or she keeps checking. I hope you are following me. I hope you are understanding me. And then you hear things like, as in, it's like, because they can't really pinpoint the issue. And that's why they are dancing around issues. We need to understand that the only way we can operate optimally is by using the language that our environment has helped us to evolve. That is the only language that can express our environment efficiently. Any foreign language is just an attempt at becoming a feeble copy of some other people. The point was made earlier on about English being the language of the internet. I beg to disagree. It was when it started, but various people from various parts of the world have really put a stamp of their languages on the internet. It is only us that are not making that effort, and we need to make that effort if we want to be something of worth in the so-called globalized world. It is usually said that anybody that goes hunting with a group of hunters without a weapon, the animals recognize the hunter without a weapon, and that's the one they attack. So when you go into this global environment without anything of yours, nothing to contribute to the global world, then you are the vulnerable one. We cannot move ahead without our languages. It just does not work. It goes beyond pride. It goes beyond linguistic pride, linguistic nationalism. It is a matter of livelihood. We are going nowhere without these languages.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tunde Adegbola. He's the Executive Director, African Languages Technology Initiative. Thank you very much. You joined us from our Ibadan Network Center. Moving on quickly now to Jos, we'll have a final comment, of course, briefly. There is an aspect I think we must quickly touch, and which is on increased inter-ethnic marriages, which has brought different people from different backgrounds to come together. Now, one of the tweets actually asks a question: if a mother speaks a different language, different from that of the father, what language or what medium will the child communicate, which is increasing problem that we have on our hands in the country?
Yes, it is indeed a problem, because some years back I was the Director of Council for Arts and Culture in Kaduna State, and I came across a lady who was a staff, in the council. She speaks a particular language in Kaduna State, and her husband speaks another language. So the husband could not speak the language very well, and she too could not speak her own mother tongue very well. So at the end of the day, despite the fact that they are married, their children speak Hausa and English only. So I tried as much as possible at that time to see that, people are doing what they are supposed to do in order to promote their languages. So we used to have days. For example, on a Saturday, it will be Kagoro Day. And on that day, we'll invite elites who are of Kagoro stock to come to our council with their families and spend the whole day talking, in their own languages, discussing their culture, eating their food, and things like that. So it appears as if, the society will have to do something in order to promote, these languages. Parents should actually do something, to imbibe these languages, in their children. But as long as they are not doing that, it is going to be very difficult, for such languages to continue. Because fundamentally, a language has to be used. And if it is not being used, it will stagnate and die. That is true for all languages.
Okay. All right. Professor Ahmed Amfani, former President, Linguistic Society of Nigeria, would like to thank you for being part of our discussion. You joined us from our Just Network studios this morning. Okay, let's now turn to Mr. Kalwa still with us here in the Abuja studios. Let's get your closing thoughts. We have another topic to deal with. What are your closing thoughts on how we can ensure that our mother tongue, in the various environments that we are in, doesn't go extinct?
Thank you, Presenter. And well, they have said it all. Everybody has actually hit the nail on the head. There's no beating about the bush. The Nigerian language, our indigenous language, is very important. Government should not brood over it. It should not be for a joke. Now, the person from Jos said something, legislation. There is no national policy on education. So that is a major challenge. There is no national policy on education. The aspect of it that is even caught up in the national policy, which is teaching of the Nigerian language, is just an aspect. So a policy is supposed to be holistic. comprising many things, covering many areas. And besides that, there should be enforcement and monitoring. And there should be sanctions for people that do not do the policy directive. And that is where the legislation comes in. There should be an act enacted by the powers of the legislation to back up Nigerian language. I remember when in 1999, our former President Obasanjo declared compulsory free primary education up to JS3. It was followed up by law. The Nigerian Universal Basic Education was formed immediately to pursue that policy directive. That is what should happen in the Nigerian.
So national policy will be key for you. All right, thank you very much.
Teachers, the government should try to train teachers. There is dearth of Nigerian language teachers in the schools. And those of them who are there, they are not motivated. They have no esteem because even the children they are teaching make jest of them. Somebody is teaching maths, English, you are here teaching Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo teacher.
Mr. Kalu Michael, thank you very much. I'm sure it's as serious as we have made it to sound this morning. Let's start doing something about it. Former Director with Federal Minister of Education, Mr. Mike Kalu Mike Ofo. Thank you very much. Kalu. All right. This is Good Morning Nigeria. After this break, we'll look into our second topic as we take a look at what will be happening at AFCON 2017.
I banned my wife not to give me fast food. Now she has turned to Mama Put.
Hey!
My own is even better. My children are like one. Tea and bread in the morning. Tea and bread in the afternoon. Under hot sun. Tea and bread when they want to go to bed.
I told Shirley, can she cook? She said yes, she can cook. Good and fine. I bet her. She gave me the cost. I gave her 2,000 naira. After several hours, she gave her. She cooked palm oil for me to eat. So I never know.
This week on your award-winning comedy series, Professor John Bull, starring Kanayo Okanayo, Mercy Johnson, Queen Wokoye, Funky Malam, Ime Bishop.
Go to Mama Put and buy food for him. Put it in the freezer. Automatically, it becomes homemade food.
Caroline.
Professor John Bull, this Tuesday and Friday, 8:30 to 9 p.m. on NTA Network, International, and Star Times.
Over and out. Welcome to the new speed of life.
Pump the jam, pump it up while your feet are stomping and the jam is pumping. Look at the crowd is jumping. Pump up the jam and push up your hand. You know, say me fans they plenty like sand. Jump up and dance, make them understand. Say me energy could have never be contraband. Them say me hype and excited because no boy can't hype like me. All of my fans them invited.
All right, you're welcome back. And now attention shifts to Gabon this weekend as that country hosts the African Football Showpiece. That's the Cup of Nations for 2017. Unfortunately, Nigeria's flag will not be hoisted in the competition after Nigeria, of course, three-time champions failed again to qualify, and this is for the second consecutive time. But then 15 other countries will join the hosts to battle for the trophy. Let's join our sports desk now for a preview of AFCON 2017.
16 countries with one trophy in sight. The anxiety is almost over as the prestigious African Cup of Nations kicks off tomorrow in Gabon. 52 countries started the race to join the host in Gabon, but only these 16 countries will be participating in the soccer fiesta. Divided into 4 groups A to D, with 4 countries in each group, Africa will no doubt be entertained in the next 3 weeks as hostilities for the 2017 AFCON begins on Saturday. In Group A is the host Gabon, whose best achievement at this level was to reach the quarter-final in 2012, in a tournament she co-hosted alongside Equatorial Guinea. For Gabon to go surpass the quarter-final stage, the recent dethroned African Player of the Year, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, must be at his very best. The Borussia Dortmund striker is coming to this tournament with an impressive performance in the German Bundesliga. Also in the group is four-time African champions, the indomitable Lions of Cameroon, whose pedigree in this tournament is huge. Completing the group are debutants Guinea-Bissau and 2013 finalists Burkina Faso. For football pundits, Group B is regarded as the group of death, as 3 of Africa's top 5 are drawn in the same group. For the Phoenix of Algeria, the pressure will be on the current African Player of the Year, Riyad Mahrez, who has been outstanding for club and country. Sadio Mane, who finished third in the African Player of the Year award, will be the talisman for the Terragins Lions of Senegal. The Senegalese has been in rich vein of form for Anfield giants Liverpool. Zimbabwe, the only country from the southern part of Africa in this tournament, are no doubt the underdogs in this group, but their sheer determination during the qualifiers is their major strength. Just like Group B, Group C is also another group with great football nations. Defending champions, the Elephants of Cote d'Ivoire, will be open to retain the title, despite the fact that they will be without the likes of Manchester City star and four-time African Player of the Year Yaya Toure, who retires from international football, and team captain Javinho owing to injury. The country is happy to welcome Crystal Palace winger Wilfred Zaha, who switched his allegiance from England. Group D welcomes back the Pharaohs of Egypt after long absence from the competition. Black Stars of Ghana, finalists in 2015, will be open to break the jinx of winning AFCON for the first time since 1982. Mali and Uganda complete the group. Come February 5th, Africa and the rest of the world will know the new African soccer king.
Well, thank you very much, sports correspondent there. Yes, right now in the studio we have sports correspondent Fisayo Ogunfoyi as NTA sports correspondent. How are you?
I don't even know how to greet you now, whether it's in my language
no,
or
let's talk the language of football. Now, AFCON 2017 is here, and of course Nigeria is not going to be there. But then, will that take away the shine that the Continental Fiesta is always noted for?
Only for 180 million people watching from here. And the Nigerian Football Federation should begin to look at that. 2 times now we have been spectators watching from outside. In fact, we couldn't defend our title in Equatorial Guinea after winning in 2013. So they should be thinking about looking at this thing seriously. It's not just the tournament itself, it's the preparation for the qualifiers. As we have found out, that it is a serious banana peel, traveling to other parts of the continent to make sure you get to the showpits itself. But for the tournament itself, I'm interested in seeing how the opening ceremony is tomorrow. Gabon is not at the very best of times at the moment. Ali Bongo and his people, a family has been ruling for about since 1967. So they are looking at all that, and we understand that they might want to stage a protest or something, but I'm sure as Africans will go ahead. But looking at the competition itself, there are some rules that has been happening across tournaments. That is, West African teams will always do well. There has been a West African team in the past 6 finals, and in the last 2 finals, 2 West African teams competed for the final in the final game. That's Nigeria and Burkina Faso in 2013, and Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana in the last one. So then the other one, apart from Egypt, Maghreb nations don't travel very well. If it's not in their zone, they don't do too well apart from Egypt. Egypt is back after a long time out, where we congratulate them. Of course, they edged out Nigeria, so that's why they are there. So we look at all that. And of course, the African Footballers of the Year, 3 of them, the 3 people who competed, Sadio Mane of Senegal, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang for the host country, of course, and the Riyad Mahrez of Algeria will be trying to do again another battle at the showpiece. So we'll see how that pans out.
All right.
Yeah, we're just wondering, in terms of the formatting, against the backdrop of what FIFA has just announced that starting 2016, we're going to have a 48-nation format for the World Cup. Might it be time also for the African Confederation of African Football to also review its own formatting, since obviously there will be more places for the African teams?
And perhaps Nigeria will qualify more easily. But yes, it is, because of course But as it is, it's the size is not necessarily the problem, because even at 16, we've been seeing some serious pummeling. But we understand that, of course, the nature of sports is for you to get more participation so that the game continues to grow on the continent. But beyond that, we should also be looking at the fact that the timing of the competition. This is the thick of the soccer season at club level. We should be thinking of perhaps moving this thing to the summer so that we get more participation. For instance, Cameroon had about 8 withdrawals from the national team. Joe Matip and his brother. We have Maxim Choupo-Moting, Eno Eyong. These are the players to deliver for them, but they have hid behind injuries and all not to come, because the people who pay the major bucks are the clubs. And now is the thick of action in Europe.
It's always been a sticky point for the scheduling of the Cup of Nations. I mean, we hold it at this time of year. Summer in most parts of the continent will be wet, and that often doesn't quite conduce to the matches that we say. Is it feasible? That's one leg of my question. Second leg is hosting. It appears these days that only a handful of nations are able to host. There are a number of countries that remain fallow. You've never heard them hosting. No country that we have heard of for a long time, either from the it's not necessarily greatly from East Africa, or or elsewhere on the African continent.
A big part of it is the economics of it. Can you actually convert the delusion of people you want into serious economic gain? Are you creative enough to make a tournament really stand for you? For Gabon and Equatorial Guinea, we know what has happened in the past 8 years. The petrodollars came in and they were able to build stadiums with their Chinese friends, some intervention from China. They were able to build stadiums. Now they need the stadiums to work. Equatorial Guinea and Gabon co-hosted in 2012. Equatorial Guinea saved Africa from embarrassment after Morocco pulled out because of Ebola. They hosted in 2015. Gabon is back. So those two countries have hosted the 3 of the last 4 Nations Cup. And there was a time Nigeria was the standby host. If you say there's a tournament that's not happening, Nigeria was okay. We can as well help you, especially the female tournaments and all that. I think a lot of people should begin to look at the competition as a way to even make sure that the African continent continues to be important to the to the African youths. And look at the tournament as a way of discovering new talents. Now, these days, to get an African youth a star, you perhaps go to Europe first, because they have gone through the back door, through academies, and gone to Europe. Before the Nations Cup, that's where you get the best African legs. Now you see Lukaku is playing for Belgium. You see Benteke, they're playing for European countries. Zinedine Zidane is Algerian. But somehow, the system, we miss them, and then they have gone to Europe. And this Aubameyang, his dad played in France for Laval, and he was born in France and all. But Gabon was able to, perhaps through your former discussion in indigenous language, they were able to bring him back to Gabon to play for them. He doesn't really know much about Gabon, but we should be able to do that so that our tournaments, have that pride of place. South American tournaments, they don't joke with it. Copa de Libertadores, the Sudamericana, the Copa America is serious business. They don't look down on it.
Okay, Fisayo, I know you are no octopus now to start doing something, but of course people will always have a way of predicting what the outlook of some matches will be. Now, AFCON 2017 is on the mind of so many people. Where do you see the swing going?
Well, Senegal has perhaps one of the strongest squads, and as a West African country, it travels very well. Algeria has a very strong squad, but they don't travel well. Arabs don't really travel very well on that side of Africa. But when you look at some usual suspects, Cote d'Ivoire, they will do well. We don't know whether they will win. Ghana will do well. We don't know whether they will win. Of course, dark horses, hosts. There's a way that, if you galvanize the entire community, they push the team, they can push the team to the final. Like it happened to South Africa. South Africa has never done anything close to that again. When they hosted, they won because of the Mandela, everything factor. And of course, Nigeria was not there. But let's see how that...
that was in 1996. But very briefly now, can we look out for indigenous coaches in this tournament? Because you have a tournament like this, and you're reminded of the late Stephen Keshel as well as, of course, the Egyptian coach, who are indigenous. Can we look forward to indigenous coaches, or it still be a question
Zimbabwe
of foreigners?
is coming with an indigenous coach. DR Congo is coming. Benge is experienced. Used to be with TP Mazembe. Used to be with Olympic Volley of Cameroon. Is an indigenous coach. But a lot of European journeymen have Renardis for Morocco, Henry Kasperzak, Tunisia, Avam Grant for Ghana, Hector Cooper These are coaches we knew in Europe. They are all now, of course, chasing the dollars here in Africa. Not too many indigenous coaches. And perhaps it's because we didn't, apart from Stephen Keshi, we've not advertised ourselves very well. Some of the, for instance, look at what has happened in the last 2 editions. We had 2 indigenous coaches who could not qualify us for the African showpiece. An Oyibo man has come now, and all the players that we said, please put them, that the Nigerian coaches were saying they are too young, the Yanachos, the Wobis, they are playing for Nigeria now. We are the form team in Africa, but we are looking from outside. We are 7th in Africa. Yes, we can't go to the top 16 tournament of the continent.
Well, NTA sports correspondent Fisayo Gunfoyi would like to thank you for being part of our discussion this morning, and then, of course, you'll be monitoring the Cup of Nations, which kicks off this weekend. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, to call it a day on the program, we'll go over now to the Weather Center to check out the prospects for the rest of the day as well.
Hello, good to have you on the weather focus from Nigerian Meteorological Agency. I'm Suleiman Gurin. With continuous appearance of mid-latitude trough and deepening of heat low, and northward movement of intertropical discontinuity ITD, early morning mist and fog patches over the coastal cities later will lifted to partly cloudy conditions. Hazy over the northern down to the central state with localized visibility of less than or equals to 2,000 meters. Later in the afternoon, the conditions over the northern down to the central states will remain the same. With little insolation, we anticipate rains over the coastal cities with partly cloudy conditions. How this weather will influence the temperature of the day? Let's take a look.
Ogbonetena in Nigeria mona. Okira. If we make a blessing, Abu.
So that's
I just said that is Good Morning Nigeria for today. My name is Blessing Abu.
All right, but let me also give my own take on this. Ivana, I makana mo engineer Good Morning Nigeria you to there now. Wa here wa wese do wa da be so wa ya agima. I and so I know one my begbere.
Okay, thank you.
I will give him ogwe. Ya sa ogwe
on another edition.
Enimena Kingsley Obio Salolo. Wa wese. Have a nice weekend.